You ever hear a story so chilling it makes you double-check your windows before bed? Well, this is one of those. Imagine being alone in a remote cabin, miles away from civilization, when you notice footprints in the snow, footprints that aren't yours. Then, just as the fear starts creeping in, something begins tapping on the walls. This isn't a ghost story. This really happened. And trust me, by the time you hear the ending, you'll never want to be alone in the woods again. In 2010, a 17-year-old boy was left heartbroken when his father unexpectedly passed away. The loss shattered his world, sending shockwaves through the entire family. Their grief wasn't just about losing a father and husband. It was about losing the countless moments they had shared as a tight-knit unit. Among the many places filled with cherished memories was their family's beloved cabin, nestled near the scenic slopes of Mount Bachelor in Oregon. This cabin wasn't just a vacation spot. It was a sanctuary. It had been the setting for winter adventures, where the family bonded over skiing, snowboarding, and hunting trips. But now, with their father gone, the once vibrant retreat felt eerily empty. The family, overwhelmed by sorrow, decided it was best to sell the cabin, knowing it could never feel the same again. For the 17-year-old, this decision was devastating. That cabin had been the backdrop of so many treasured moments with his father, and the thought of letting it go felt like losing another piece of him. When his mother listed the property for sale, he made a heartfelt request. Before they finalized the sale, he wanted to spend a few days there. One last chance to soak in the memories and say goodbye in his own way. Understanding his emotions, his mother agreed. She told him to take as much time as he needed, but once he returned, the cabin would no longer be theirs. So, with his father's car, left to him as part of the inheritance, he packed up supplies, grabbed his loyal dog, and set off for the cabin. His goal was simple: to spend a few quiet days honoring the place that had meant so much to his family. Upon arriving, he took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp mountain air as he stepped inside. The cabin was just as he remembered, warm, familiar, filled with echoes of laughter from past winters. He stocked the fridge with snacks, hooked up his PlayStation, and settled in. The dog eagerly explored the space, his paws tapping against the wooden floor as he sniffed around. The first 2 days were exactly what the boy had hoped for. He reminisced, played video games, and even took a few trips to the slopes. Being there felt like reconnecting with his father in some way. But on the third day, everything changed. Overnight, a heavy snowfall blanketed the landscape, making travel difficult. The boy decided to stay in, embracing a cozy day indoors. He was actually looking forward to it. Just him, the dog, and some uninterrupted relaxation. But by midday, things started to feel different. At first, it was subtle, just a strange, lingering unease that he couldn't quite place. But soon, that feeling would evolve into something much more unsettling. To understand what happens next, let's take a closer look at the cabin's layout. Built into the mountainside, the cabin had a unique structure. The back half was embedded into the earth, with no windows except for a small one in the bathroom. The front, however, was a striking contrast. Tall, open, and inviting, with large glass windows stretching across both floors. The second story featured a master bedroom with a walkout balcony, offering a perfect view of the snowy clearing ahead. Beyond that clearing, a dense forest surrounded the cabin on all sides. The towering pine trees created an almost impenetrable wall of nature, except for a small opening at the front where the family had cleared space for the driveway. Among these trees stood a particularly distinctive one. Let's call it the sitting tree. About 20 feet up, a thick, horizontal branch jutted out, almost like a natural bench, facing the cabin's front windows. Though it looked like the perfect place to sit, it was too high to reach without climbing gear. Now back to that third day. As the boy went about his afternoon, the dog began pacing near the door, signaling he needed to go outside. Bundling up against the cold, the boy opened the door and stepped into the thick snow, letting his dog run off to relieve himself. As the young man stood outside with his dog, the crisp mountain air sent a chill down his spine. The silence of the snowy landscape was comforting, until he noticed something peculiar. Imprinted in the fresh snow were a set of footprints. They were recent, undisturbed by the snowfall, and most notably, they weren't his. His heart rate quickened as he studied them. He hadn't stepped outside all day, and his nearest neighbors were too far away to have casually wandered onto his property. The prints emerged from the dense tree line and meandered across the clearing, pausing suspiciously near the cabin before disappearing up the mountainside behind it. He followed them briefly, curiosity mingling with unease. Could someone have been watching him? Rationalizing the situation, he shook his head. Maybe a lost hiker, maybe nothing at all. Deciding not to let it bother him, he retreated inside, shutting the door firmly behind him. The rest of the evening unfolded like the others before it. Snacking, gaming, the dog curled up beside him. Eventually, exhaustion set in, and he powered down his console, drawing the thick blackout curtains around the cabin's lower level. He methodically locked every door and window before heading upstairs to the master bedroom, the dog trailing behind. As soon as he settled under the covers, the dog's body stiffened. The dog's ears pricked up, gaze locked onto the staircase leading down to the front door. The young man turned his head sharply, straining his ears. The cabin was silent. He reassured himself that the dog was just being overly alert, until the dog suddenly leaped from the bed and sprinted downstairs. Now his stomach twisted. The dog paced near the door, circling in agitation, pressing his nose against the crack at the bottom. The dog wanted out, desperately. The young man hesitated, every logical instinct telling him to stay inside. But the dog wasn't settling. Sighing, he finally gave in, opening the door just wide enough for the dog to slip out. Expecting the usual quick relief before returning inside, he instead watched as the dog didn't stop. He crept forward, body low, his gaze locked on something out there. His eyes followed the dog's, landing on the tree line, specifically the sitting tree. The branch, which had always looked like an eerie natural seat, now seemed occupied. Was that? No. His mind had to be playing tricks on him. The thick darkness of the forest made it impossible to be sure. But whatever it was, the dog saw it too. His pulse thundered as he grabbed the dog's collar, yanking him back inside. He slammed the door shut, twisting the lock, pulling the blinds shut in one frantic motion. The dog resisted at first, his body tense, but he finally relented as the boy pulled him upstairs. Yet once inside the room, the dog refused to climb onto the bed. He stood at the edge, staring intently at the staircase, muscles coiled like a spring. The young man tried to ignore the unease creeping up his spine. Maybe the dog just had an overactive imagination. Maybe they both did. And then he heard it. Footsteps. Above him, directly on the roof. His breath caught. The cabin had no attic, no crawl space. There was only the thin barrier of the ceiling between him and whatever had climbed up there. The steps were slow, deliberate, as if someone or something was watching. His mind reeled. A deer? A bear? But no, this was different. The steps were too controlled. And worse, they didn't sound like paws. They sounded like hooves. Cold terror rooted him to the spot. How had it gotten up there? There were no trees close enough for an animal to leap onto the roof. No ladder. Nothing. And then, just as suddenly as they had started, the footsteps stopped. The silence was unbearable. The dog's attention snapped away from the roof, toward the balcony. The closed door. The heavy blackout curtains. The young man did not want to pull those curtains aside. But some things can't be unseen. With a deep breath, he stepped forward. His trembling fingers grasped the fabric. He hesitated for just a moment before yanking it back. And in the darkness beyond the glass, something was looking right back at him. The darkness outside was absolute. Even with his eyes adjusted, the young man could barely make out the snow-covered balcony before him. His breath curled in the frigid air as he hesitated, his hand resting on the door handle. With a deep inhale, he unlocked the door and pushed it open. The cold rushed in as he stepped onto the balcony, the wooden planks creaking beneath his weight. Immediately, he turned his gaze upward, scanning the roof. Nothing. No sign of an animal. No footprints. No disturbances in the fresh layer of snow. The silence felt almost unnatural. He let out a shaky breath, feeling a moment of relief. Maybe he had imagined it. His flashlight flicked on, cutting through the heavy blackness, illuminating the roof, the balcony railing, and finally, the edge of the tree line. That's when he noticed the dog's posture. The dog was still downstairs, but he could hear her shifting, growling lowly, her attention fixed on a singular point beyond the clearing. Something was out there. Heart pounding, he slowly turned the beam of his flashlight toward the sitting tree. The light swept across the thick branches, up the trunk, higher, until his blood ran cold. Perched 20 feet up, balanced unnaturally on the broad horizontal branch, was a figure, a man. At first, the sheer strangeness of the sight prevented him from fully processing it. The man was crouched, impossibly tall even in that position, with his hands gripping a branch above him. His mouth was open, too wide, as if frozen in a silent scream, but his eyes never blinked. They were locked onto the boy, unmoving, watching, waiting. The distance between them was no more than 50 yards. His flashlight, despite its strong beam, seemed almost useless in the oppressive night. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then instinct kicked in. The young man gasped, stumbled back, and the flashlight tumbled from his grasp. As soon as the beam hit the snow, the dog barked sharply, her growls turning frantic. Scrambling, he scooped the flashlight back up, heart hammering in his chest. He aimed the beam at the tree again. The man was gone. Frantically, he swept the light across the ground. Nothing. Not a single sign of movement. His breath came in ragged gasps as he bolted back inside, slamming the door shut, twisting the lock with trembling hands. The dog was already backing away from the entrance, her tail tucked, ears flattened. The house suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Blinds drawn, curtains shut, doors locked. He wasn't taking chances. He climbed into bed, pulling the blankets up, his heart still racing. The dog, normally fearless, refused to leave his side. His mind raced. Did I really see that? Was it just my imagination? But no amount of rationalizing could erase the image from his mind. The unnaturally tall man, perched in the tree. The unblinking stare. The way he had just disappeared. He wasn't sure how much time passed, but as he lay there, his mind spiraling, the first sound sent his stomach plummeting. Tap. A single, deliberate tap against the front door. The dog's ears shot up. The boy held his breath. Then, another tap, and another, soft, rhythmic, almost playful. He squeezed his eyes shut, willing it to stop. But instead, the sound moved. The tapping was no longer at the door, it was on the wall. Tap, 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 then silence. For a moment, all he could hear was the blood pounding in his ears. But then the tapping returned, this time at the small bathroom window behind his room. The window was just a few feet away. It was right there. Tap, tap, tap. His breath was shallow. He didn't dare move. He could feel the dog pressing against his side now, her body rigid with fear. And then, as if whoever or whatever was outside wanted him to know it could go anywhere, the tapping began again, this time on the balcony door, right outside his room. His stomach twisted into knots. That door was the only thing separating him from it. The sound continued, slow, patient taps against the glass. Then finally silence. For a fleeting second, he thought it was over. Then came the worst part. Footsteps. Above him. On the roof. Tap, tap, tap. He clutched the dog tightly, the dog trembling against him. The rhythmic knocking continued. It didn't stop. It simply moved, pacing along the roof, circling, pressing in on all sides. Felt endless, mocking. By the time the sun finally rose, he was still wide awake, paralyzed in fear. The moment daylight crept in, he finally worked up the courage to pull back the curtains. The balcony was empty, but the footprints remained. They circled the cabin, a perfect track of footsteps, looping around the house, over and over, path worn into the snow. He stepped out, trembling, and looked up at the roof. the same eerie footprints leading to nowhere. His eyes trailed to the tree line where the path ended. The prince stopped at the sitting tree and then vanished. That was all he needed. Within the hour, he was gone. He packed up his things, loaded the dog into the car, and drove away, never looking back. The cabin sold soon after, and he never returned. To this day, he has no idea what he saw that night, and he doesn't ever want to find out. Some places hold memories, others hold something else. Was it a lost traveler? A twisted prank? Or something that simply wasn't human? One thing is certain, he never went back. And after hearing this, can you blame him? What do you think was lurking outside that night? Drop your theories in the comments below, because I'm not sleeping after this one.